All right, good afternoon, everybody. It's Jay again. So I've been getting a lot of questions lately on plant food and what to feed the plants and how often should I feed the plants and which plants to feed when. And I'll tell you guys, since we do it here and we do everything organically, it's very, very easy to do because you're basically just applying a set amount of compost and then you're just waiting for the plant and the tree to accept that into the root system, which does take a little bit longer than say a fertilizer would. But I'll tell you, you're not going to get the growth and vigor and green like you're going to get out of using a compost and doing it a natural way. That's how you're going to get these beautiful leaves and this beautiful green. So today I'm going to go over feeding plants in pots. I'm not going to go over feeding trees in the ground. I'm going to do a separate video on that one. But I'm going to go over some of these potted plants and what I use to feed my potted plants. And I'll tell you guys, it's really, really easy to do around here, and it's really easy to do once you've got a lot of like organic compost down and once you've got a lot of earthworms. So I generally do a lot of my feeding when I do my rearranging of my potted plants, and that is usually about 3 times a year, when you're going to be rearranging them to get more sun or get a little bit less sun, and then in the fall a little bit more sun. So you're probably going to be moving your potted plants around at least 3 times a year. And so I take advantage during those times, and that's when I actually do a lot of my feeding. So I move things around in February to get them into more sun. And then around April, May, this time I'm going to start putting things more in the shade, so they'll be moved again. And then once we cool down in the fall, of course, those plants will be moved back out again into the full sun. So they'll be moved 3 times a year, so they get fed 3 times a year. But everybody's always asking me how I'm getting so much fruit and flowers out of these potted plants. And it's really a pretty simple formula for me anyway. And I will kind of show you the process. And the way that I do it also has to depend on that you're doing it sort of organically, and you're going to have a lot of compost around the yard because you're going to probably end up with quite a few earthworms, as I do here. So all of my potted plants are on hardscaping. They're all on concrete. But what ends up happening is, as you're watering the potted plant, of course, some of that nutrient and compost starts to wash out the bottom. And not only that, but you get a lot of earthworms, because I have earthworms in the soil. They're going to be in the plants. This is probably one of the only nurseries where you're going to find, when you go to pull this plant out of the pot, it's going to be just completely full of earthworms, every single one of these pots. And what they do is they move in at night. They're out here on the ground, and they move in through the potted hole on the pot, and they get inside the pot, of course, and they do their eating. And then as they poop, it starts to come out the bottom of the pots through the holes of the drainage pot, basically, right? So this is a really good example. This is a dragon fruit that I'm going to be moving. So you're really going to only need a couple items to feed the potted plants if you're doing everything naturally and organically. And if you don't have any compost laying around, well, then that's obviously what you're going to want to use for the compost. So I'm going to go ahead and move this pot then. I'm going to go ahead and drag this out of the way. And if we look underneath the pot, there is just earthworm central. So look at all these earthworms, and you have to remember that this is on concrete. So the concrete's right here, and these guys are in that little thin bit of soil that has come out of the bottom of the pots. Let's see if we can get some of these guys together here. Feisty little dudes. This is what you need in your yard. You're not going to be using compost worms or red wigglers to do a lot of your tilling. But just sitting underneath this pot, oh man, there's quite a few in there. Let's see how many we we can get out of here. Oh man, this is just fantastic. It's like the original earthworm farm over here. I mean, there is so many worms over here that it is insane. They're everywhere. And they're doing all my drainage and they're doing all my tilling. And if there's this many just sitting underneath a pot on the concrete, then you can imagine. Oh man, look at that little honey pot. Look at that little honey pot. Oh, look at that. It's just worms on top of worms. Yeah, you guys wonder how I get my drainage the way I get it? This is how. This is exactly how. But yeah, can just keep grabbing them handful after handful. Oh my gosh, there's millions on this property. There are so many earthworms. Look at all these guys. That's a pretty insane amount of earthworms to have just basically kind of scraped off the ground. So what are we going to do with these guys then, right? So I'm going to grab this big handful, big old handful of worms, and I'm going to just drop this right in the pot. Okay, then you're going to need a couple more items. One of them being a scraper tool. And then I'm just going to go and I'm going to scrape all this up. And into the pot it goes. I mean, look at all this. Look at all that nutrition. That's just pure earthworm castings. This is just pure earthworm poop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scrape myself back down to the concrete again. Scrape up all this worm poop. And right back in the pot it goes. Almost got it all here. There's the rest of it. Just a little bit of everything in there. Right back in. Okay, now I've got my spot bare again. I'm going to push my plant back in to where it needs to be. I'm going to get out any of these big sticks. These won't really help any. Okay, now I've got my spot back. Okay, last thing you're going to need is an egg. An egg. Crack the egg. Put said egg in potted plant. Throw in the eggshell and all. And then we're going to water him in. All right, so now we got the hose and we got it on full blast and we're going to water this in. Now keep in mind that that egg is going to froth up in this pot as though you've put some dish soap in the pot. It's okay, don't panic. Those foam bubbles will go away. So let's grab the hose and we're going to water this one in. So we're going to wash all that egg. See it start foaming? Bubbly. And you're going to wash all that egg and that compost and those earthworms back down into that pot. And that's it. We are done. It is fed. Now you can see all that nice compost tea from the earthworms, and the earthworm poop has filled that up. You can see the foam, the bubbles there from the egg, and it has washed all that down and is now draining out the bottom, which now this fertility is going to start to kind of build up too. This is all really, really, really nutritious water that's kind of running off these. So now it's grabbed on further down there, and I kind of channel that off into some other plants. And now if you're losing any nutrients coming down from the pot and washing it out the pot, well, then it's just going to run down onto another plant and collect over there. So yeah, guys, it's that easy. It's literally that easy. That's how I feed every potted plant every season, just like that, basically, right? So if you don't have the earthworms and the earthworm poop that has been built up, well, then you can use a compost. So what I use is like my Aztec Gold compost. It's a feeding compost, and you can put a little bit of that in the pot instead of the earthworm poop that's coming off the bottom. But obviously that's the best feed, is to kind of scrape that back up again and just put it right back into the pot again. And then of course the egg, and the egg is an amazing thing as far as nutrients, because everything eats an egg, if you guys think about it. Chickens even eat their own eggs, but out in the wild, anything will eat an egg. A snake will eat an egg, a bird will eat an egg, muskrat will eat an egg. Literally anything and everything, including us, eats eggs, because it's the basic building blocks of life. It's your basic proteins there, and it's cheap. You know, an egg ain't gonna cost you that much to feed each potted plant each year. So yeah, guys, that is exactly how I feed potted fruit trees, and pretty much every fruit tree around here. And as I'm going to be arranging and rearranging some of these pots here soon, I will be doing that to every single tree here, because it just starts to build up just super, super heavy. I mean, this is, the earthworm castings just kind of pour out of everywhere, and then they start to kind of build up on the ground. You can see it literally coming out of the hole of every single pot here. Well, that's all earthworm castings. So that's free food. You basically just scrape it up and put it back in the plant again. All right, guys, so that's it. That's how I feed my potted plants. It's very, very, very simple. I do that to every single one of these guys. It's just a little bit of compost and an egg, and it's as simple as that. And these plants and trees are absolutely beautiful and green, and I dare anyone really to kind of come over and try to find any kind of nutrient deficiencies or any kind of salt burn on any of my plants. And I use all just hose water, as you just saw coming out of the hose there. So your filtration system is actually your soil. So all right, guys, thank you for watching. I hope that helps. Potted plants don't need a whole lot of food because they're contained, and if you put a bunch of nutrients in there and you don't know what you're doing, especially fertilizers, well, then you're gonna set that plant back if you don't know what you're doing. So if you do it naturally with compost and an egg, I can guarantee you guys will not have bad results. All right, guys, that is it. Thank you for watching, and I will do a video here real soon on how I feed the trees in the ground. But just to let you know, it's almost as simple, or if not as simple, as what I just showed you there as far as feeding the trees in the pots. So in the ground, you're going to be just using some compost, or that's what we use, unless you want to go the fertilizer route, which we do not recommend, but that is entirely up to you. All right, guys, thank you for watching.